You know, the ancient Celts, they lived over 2,000 years ago. And it stretched back maybe 1,000, 1,500 BC to the first century BC, when their culture was pretty much wiped out by Julius Caesar. He went into Gaul, that's modern day France, and he conquered Gaul for the Roman Empire, and the Celtic culture was pretty much obliterated. I mean, it continued underground for centuries, but for the most part, the Celts ended around 30 BC, or I'm sorry, I fucked up. Around 48, 46 BC. I don't know, sometime around it. Before the year 1 came. Before Jesus Christ was born, if I may utter his name and not have some sensitive little snowflakes just freak out over it. So what I got to say about that, this anti-Christianity going around over the last 30 years is just uncalled for. I mean, trying to demolish Christmas, trying to eradicate the name Jesus and Christ from the vocabulary. Just so many ways, so many ways. And the ancient Celts, to get back on track, well, they had this custom where most of the warfare wasn't for gain of resources or gain of territory or for the weakening of a foe. Most of their warfare was a battle to establish honor and nobility. So they would have these small battles between just a handful of people, maybe a couple dozen, maybe a few dozen people. And a lot of this mostly actually was the aristocracy, the nobility, and they would just fight sometimes to the death, or perhaps just to put the opponent down, usually to death. I think they would kill them, and then whoever won, they would become nobler and more honorable than they were before. And their name would survive their death and continue on as the bards sang songs of their valiant deeds and whatnot. So what these Celts would do when they defeated their enemy, and especially more so for the more noble their enemy that they had defeated, the more valuable their heads, the victorious Celts would behead the bodies of their enemies and take the heads home and mount them on the walls of their cabins. And most of the cabins were single room affairs. So in essence, they were mounting these chopped off heads in the dining area of their homes. And when foreign dignitaries would visit the ancient Celts at their homes, they would throw up, just puke, retch and puke and throw up at the sight of these decapitated heads hanging on the walls of the Celts. And they had a hard time eating dinner there with these rotted heads. But to the credit of the Celts, they did preserve these heads in cedar oil. So after a certain point, they weren't going to be rotting very much. That minimized the rot and to help maintain somewhat the original look of the living version of the head. Anyway, the Celts believed that the power and the nobility and the honor and the valor of the head's preceding living host, i.e., the head was placed on the living body of their foe. While they were alive, they were valorous and noble and honorable. The greater that was, the more honor, nobility, and honor was contained in their head, and therefore the head as a decoration in the home bestowed upon the dwellers of that home the nobility, honor, and valor that was in the head while it was alive. And if it was a really good, honorable, and valorous person that they had killed, they would chop the skull off from about here on up and inlay it with gold and then make a goblet out of it. And when you drank from the skull of a great warrior, that would further imbue you with their valor. We don't do that anymore. We've kind of gone beyond that to glass and plastic drinkware. And not too many of us drink out of skulls anymore. Well, that's all I have for tonight. That's my thought for the day. Have a good evening.
The line between the living and the dead becomes blurred with deadly consequences in The This Side of Midnight by David Halk. Available in ebook and paperback at Amazon.com.